Jake Morrison was tired. He had been flying cargo ships between space stations for 3 years now, and every day felt the same. Wake up, check the ship, load boxes, fly to another station, unload boxes, sleep, repeat. His brown hair was always messy, and his clothes always smelled like engine oil. At 28 years old, he figured this was his life now. The cargo bay of his ship was full of food supplies and mining equipment. He was heading to Kepler Station, a small trading post that sat between Earth space and the outer colonies. It was not a fancy place, but it had good food and decent beds. More importantly, it was where humans could meet aliens without too much trouble. Jake landed his ship with a soft bump. The docking bay was busy as always. Humans in work clothes moved boxes around while strange alien creatures did their own business. He had seen many different aliens over the years. Some looked like giant bugs, others like walking trees, and some like nothing he could describe. After a while, they all seemed normal to him. He was checking his cargo list when he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me? Are you the pilot of this Earth ship?" Jake turned around and stopped breathing for a second. The woman standing there was beautiful in a way that made his brain forget how to work. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with golden eyes that seemed to glow in the station lights. Her skin had a slight shine to it, like it was made of the finest silk. Her hair was long and silver, moving like it was underwater even though there was no wind. "I am Jake," he said, trying not to sound stupid. "This is my ship. Do you need something?" She smiled, and Jake felt his heart skip. "I am Zira. I work as a translator here on the station. I was hoping you might have some Earth music in your cargo. The merchants I work with are very interested in human culture." Jake did have some music files in his personal storage. He was not supposed to trade personal items, but something about this woman made him want to help her. "I have some jazz and rock music from Earth. Would that work?" Her eyes lit up even brighter. "That would be perfect. What would you want in exchange?" Jake almost said she did not need to pay him anything, but caught himself. He was not rich and needed every credit he could get. "How about you show me around the station? I have been coming here for months, but I always just stay on my ship or in the same bar." Zira agreed, and they spent the next 4 hours walking through parts of the station Jake had never seen. She showed him markets where aliens sold things he could not pronounce. She took him to restaurants that served food from a dozen different worlds. She explained the different alien cultures and why some species never talked to others. Jake found out that Zira was not human, though she looked mostly like one. She was from a species called the Velkari. They lived much longer than humans and had built cities on hundreds of worlds. She was 127 years old, which she said was like being in her 20s for a human. "My people are very advanced," she told him, as they sat in a quiet restaurant, eating something that tasted like chicken but was purple. "We have been traveling between stars for thousands of years, but we are also very set in our ways. Young Velkari like me are not supposed to travel alone or make our own decisions." Jake thought this sounded terrible. "So how are you here by yourself?" Zira looked around to make sure no one was listening. "I may have told my family I was going on a short research trip. They think I am studying human trade patterns on a world much closer to home." This made Jake laugh. "So you are running away from home?" "I prefer to think of it as finding myself," Zira said with a smile that made Jake forget about everything else in the universe. They talked until the station's lights dimmed for sleep cycle. Jake found out that Zira loved Earth music because it was so different from Velkari songs. She was fascinated by how humans could live such short lives but still find time for art and fun. Jake told her about growing up on Earth, about his job flying cargo, and about his dream of maybe owning his own shipping company someday. When they finally said goodbye, Jake felt like something important had happened. He gave Zira his communication code, and she promised to call him the next time he was at the station. Over the next 2 months, Jake found excuses to stop at Kepler Station more often than he needed to. Each time, he would spend hours with Zira. They would eat meals together, listen to music, and talk about their different worlds. Zira taught him basic words in her language. Jake showed her how to play human card games. Jake started to realize he was falling in love with her. The way she laughed at his jokes, how she got excited about simple human things like ice cream and baseball, the way she listened to him talk about his boring job like it was the most interesting thing in the world. He had never felt this way about anyone before. Zira seemed to feel the same way. She would light up when his ship arrived at the station. She started keeping human foods in her quarters just for when he visited. She even learned to make coffee the way he liked it. One day, Jake decided to be brave. Zira, I know we come from different worlds, but I really care about you. Would you maybe want to come with me sometime? I could show you Earth, introduce you to my family. Zira was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I would like that very much. But first, I think you should meet my family too. It is important that they know about us. Jake agreed, thinking it would be nice to meet her parents. How different could they be from human parents? Zira seemed happy, but also nervous about something. When Jake asked her about it, she just said that her family could be a little protective. A week later, they were flying toward Valkyrie space in Jake's cargo ship. Zira gave him coordinates to her homeworld. As they got closer, Jake started to see more and more alien ships. They were huge, much bigger than anything humans had built. The ships looked like they were made for war, with weapons that could probably destroy planets. Zira, Jake said as he looked at the massive fleet around them, exactly how important is your family? Zira bit her lip and looked out at the ships surrounding them. I may have left out some details about who I am. The moment Jake's ship landed on the Valkyrie homeworld, he knew he was in trouble. The landing pad was made of some kind of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Guards in armor that looked like it was grown rather than built surrounded his ship before he could even turn off the engines. Each guard was at least 7 feet tall and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Zira took a deep breath and looked at Jake with eyes that seemed sad and scared at the same time. Jake, I need to tell you something important. When I said I was 127 years old, that is true. But for my people, that makes me very young. Like a teenager in human years. Jake felt his stomach drop. How young exactly? In human terms, maybe 16 or 17 years old. My people live for thousands of years. We are not considered adults until we are at least 500 years old. Before Jake could process this information, the door to his ship opened. A group of Valkyrie soldiers entered, followed by a woman who made Jake's blood turn cold. She was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Her eyes were the same gold as Zira's, but much older and much angrier. When she looked at Jake, he felt like a mouse being stared at by a very large cat. Princess Zira Thek Velandra, the woman said in a voice that sounded like thunder. You will explain why you have brought this human to our world. Jake's brain stopped working for a moment. Princess. Zira nodded miserably. Jake, meet my mother, Matriarch Savathek Velandra. She rules our entire empire. Mom, this is Jake Morrison. He is the human I told you about in my messages. The matriarch stepped closer to Jake. She was so tall that Jake had to crane his neck to look at her face. You are the human who has been corrupting my daughter's mind with your primitive culture. Jake found his voice, though it came out higher than he wanted. I have not been corrupting anyone. Zira came to me. She wanted to learn about human music and food. We just became friends. Friends. The matriarch's voice could have frozen lava. My daughter is a child by our standards. You have been taking advantage of her innocence. This made Jake angry enough to forget how scared he was. Your daughter is not innocent or helpless. She has been living on her own for months, making her own decisions, working as a translator. She speaks 6 languages and knows more about interstellar trade than most humans twice her age. If she is a child, then she is the smartest and most capable child I have ever met. The throne room went completely silent. Every Velkari in the room stared at Jake like he had just grown a second head. Apparently, nobody ever talked back to the matriarch. The matriarch studied Jake for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "You have courage, human. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. Very well. You claim my daughter is mature enough to make adult decisions. You claim you have not taken advantage of her youth. I will give you a chance to prove these claims." She gestured, and 2 guards moved forward. They put some kind of energy bands around Jake's wrists. The bands did not hurt, but they made his hands tingle in an unpleasant way. "You will undergo the trial of worth," the matriarch announced. 3 tests to prove that humans deserve our respect and that you are worthy of my daughter's attention. If you pass all 3 tests, I will consider allowing your relationship to continue. If you fail even 1 test, you will be vaporized and your species will be marked as a threat to be eliminated. Jake swallowed hard. "What kind of tests?" "First, you will prove your strength in combat against one of our warriors. Second, you will prove your intelligence by solving a strategic problem. Third, you will prove the truth of your feelings for my daughter under a telepathic scan. No human has ever attempted these trials before." Zira stepped forward. "Mother, this is not fair. Jake did not know about our customs. He thought I was an adult because I told him I was." The matriarch turned her frightening gaze on her daughter. "And why did you tell him you were an adult?" "Child, did you think lying would make it true?" "I was not lying," Zira said, and Jake was surprised by how strong her voice sounded. "I have been making adult decisions for months. I left home, found work, supported myself, made friends with aliens from dozens of different species. I learned new languages and new cultures. I helped solve trade disputes and prevented 3 different conflicts between merchant groups. If that does not make me an adult, then maybe our definition of adulthood needs to change." The matriarch's 4 eyes narrowed. "You will not speak to me of changing our ancient ways, child. Our traditions have kept our people strong for 10,000 years, and those same traditions would have kept me locked in a palace for the next 300 years, learning nothing about the universe except what my tutors chose to teach me." Zira shot back. "Jake saw me as an equal, not as a child to be protected. He listened to my opinions and treated my ideas with respect. That is more than anyone in this court has ever done." Jake felt a strange mix of pride and terror. He was proud of Zira for standing up to her mother, but terrified because he was pretty sure this argument was making his chances of survival much worse. The matriarch was quiet for a long time, staring at her daughter with an expression Jake could not read. Finally, she turned back to Jake. "Tomorrow you will begin the trials. Tonight you will be taken to quarters where you can prepare. Guards will watch you to make sure you do not try to escape." As the guards led Jake away, he heard Zira call out, "Jake, I am sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Jake turned back and managed to smile at her. "It is not your fault. We will figure this out." The guards took Jake to a room that was clearly designed for prisoners, though it was more comfortable than most human prison cells. There was a bed, a small table, and a window that looked out over the Velkari capital city. The city was beautiful, in an alien way, with buildings that seemed to grow out of the ground like crystals and lights that moved like living things. Jake sat on the bed and tried to think. In less than 24 hours, he would be fighting a Velkari warrior in single combat. He had never been in a real fight in his life. His opponent would probably be twice his size and have natural weapons that could cut him in half. Even if he somehow survived the combat trial, he still had to solve some kind of strategic problem and then let aliens poke around in his brain. But the worst part was not the danger to himself. The matriarch had said that if he failed, she would mark humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Jake had seen the size of the Velkari fleet. They could probably destroy Earth without breaking a sweat. His personal problems had somehow become a threat to his entire species. Jake looked out the window at the alien city and tried not to think about how many ways he could mess this up. Somewhere in the palace, Zira was probably arguing with her mother about ancient traditions and the rights of young people. Jake hoped she would not get herself in too much trouble defending him. He had come to this world thinking he was going to meet his girlfriend's parents. Instead, he had discovered that his girlfriend was alien royalty, that their relationship might be considered illegal by her people's standards, and that he was going to have to fight for his life to prove he was worthy of her. Jake had always thought his life was boring. Right now, boring sounded pretty good. Jake woke up when someone banged on his door. He had barely slept, spending most of the night staring at the ceiling and trying not to panic. A guard entered carrying what looked like breakfast, though Jake could not identify most of the food. There was something that might have been fruit and a drink that tasted like bitter coffee mixed with honey. "The first trial begins in 1 hour," the guard said in heavily accented English. "You may choose your weapons and the rules of combat." Jake nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. He had spent the night thinking about this moment. He could not win a traditional fight against a Velkari warrior. They were bigger, stronger, and probably had centuries of combat experience. But maybe he did not need to win. Maybe he just needed to not lose too badly. The combat arena was huge, with thousands of Velkari watching from seats that rose up like a bowl around the fighting area. Jake walked onto the sand-covered floor, feeling very small and very human. The matriarch sat on a throne that overlooked the arena, with Zira beside her. Even from this distance, Jake could see that Zira looked worried. His opponent entered from the opposite side of the arena. Commander Thekvar was everything Jake had feared. 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that looked like it could stop bullets, and armed with 4 muscular arms that ended in claws. The crowd cheered when they saw him. "Human," Thekvar called out in a voice like grinding stone. "What weapons do you choose for our combat?" Jake took a deep breath. "I choose hand-to-hand combat with no weapons. But I want to use Earth rules. Boxing rules." The crowd murmured in confusion. Thekvar tilted his massive head. "What are these boxing rules?" "We fight in rounds," Jake explained, hoping his voice did not shake. 3 minutes of fighting, then 1 minute of rest. If I get knocked down, you have to back away and let me get up. If I cannot get up in 10 seconds, you win. We fight until one of us cannot continue or gives up." The matriarch leaned forward on her throne. "These are strange rules, human. Why do you choose them?" "Because they are fair," Jake said. "Boxing is about skill and heart, not just size and strength." Thekvar laughed, a sound like boulders falling. "Very well, small human. I will play your game before I crush you." The fight began, and Jake immediately learned that all his planning meant nothing when faced with a creature that could probably lift a car over its head. Thekvar's first punch sent Jake flying across the arena. Jake hit the sand hard enough to see stars, but he got up. That was the key to his plan. No matter how hard he got hit, no matter how much it hurt, he had to get up. Boxing was not about being the strongest fighter. It was about being the fighter who could take punishment and keep coming back for more. Jake spent the first round getting beaten up while the crowd laughed. Thekvar seemed to be enjoying himself, treating the fight like a game. But by the second round, something changed. Jake started moving differently. He could not hit as hard as his opponent, but he could hit faster and from angles Thekvar did not expect. More importantly, Jake started talking. "Is that all you got, big guy? My grandmother hits harder than you, and she has been dead for 5 years. Thekvar had probably never been insulted during a fight before. It seemed to confuse him. "What are you saying, human?" "I am saying you fight like a tourist," Jake said, dodging another massive punch. All size, no style. Do they teach you how to fight on this planet, or do you just rely on being scary? The crowd was not laughing anymore. They were watching with interest as this small human refused to stay down and actually seemed to be annoying their champion. Jake could not win by strength, but he was discovering that humans had other weapons. By the 5th round, HFY was breathing hard. Jake was bleeding from a dozen cuts and would probably hurt for weeks, but he was still on his feet. More importantly, he had managed to land several good punches. Velkari might be naturally armored, but they still felt pain. "You are tougher than you look, human," HFY admitted during a rest period. "Thanks," Jake gasped, spitting out blood. "You are exactly as tough as you look, which is really, really tough." The fight went 12 rounds. By the end, both fighters were exhausted. Jake had been knocked down 6 times, but he had gotten up every single time. HFY had barely been hurt, but he looked at Jake with something like respect. "I declare this human worthy," HFY announced to the crowd. "He cannot match my strength, but his spirit is strong. Any warrior who can fight for 12 rounds, after being knocked down 6 times, has earned the right to call himself a fighter." The crowd cheered, though Jake was not sure if they were cheering for him or just happy the fight was over. The matriarch nodded once, which Jake hoped meant he had passed the first test. The second test came 2 hours later, after Jake had been patched up by Velkari doctors who seemed fascinated by human anatomy. They gave him something for the pain. That made everything feel fuzzy around the edges. The strategic test took place in a room full of holographic displays showing star maps, trade routes, and resource reports. The problem was managing resources across 12 star systems while dealing with 3 different conflicts and a trade embargo. Jake stared at the displays for a long time, trying to understand the scope of the problem. The traditional solution seemed to be about optimal resource allocation and military positioning. But Jake was not a military strategist. He was a cargo pilot who dealt with different species every day. "Most of these conflicts seem to be about resources," Jake said finally. "One group has something another group needs, but they do not trust each other enough to trade fairly." "That is correct," said the Velkari advisor running the test. "How would you resolve this?" "Make everyone profit," Jake said. "Instead of fighting over resources, set up trade networks where everyone gets something they need. The Kethran have rare minerals but need food. The Velkari have food production but need those minerals. The Shard Collective has manufacturing capability but needs raw materials. Connect them all with fair trade agreements and suddenly nobody needs to fight." The advisor looked confused. "But what about military dominance? Strategic advantage? What good is strategic advantage if everyone is prosperous and happy?" Jake asked. "Happy people do not start wars. Well-fed people do not rebel. If everyone is making profit from trade, they have a reason to keep the peace." The test continued for 3 hours. Jake's solution was completely different from any Velkari strategy. Instead of conquest and control, he proposed cooperation and mutual benefit. Instead of military might, he suggested economic partnership. The advisors seemed baffled but intrigued. Finally came the third test. The telepathic scan was conducted by an ancient Velkari whose skin was so pale it was almost transparent. Jake sat in a chair while the telepathic touched his forehead with one finger. "Think about your relationship with the princess," the telepathic said. "Remember every moment, every conversation, every feeling." Jake closed his eyes and let his memories flow. He remembered meeting Zira for the first time, how her beauty had taken his breath away. But then he remembered their first real conversation, how smart and funny she had been. He remembered teaching her to play cards, and how she had beaten him by the 3rd game because she was too intelligent for her own good. He remembered her excitement when she tried pizza for the first time, her laughter when he told her jokes that were probably not very funny, the way she listened when he talked about his dreams of owning his own shipping company, how she had supported his ideas even when they seemed impossible. Most importantly, he remembered how she had stood up to her mother, defending her right to make her own choices. In that moment, Jake had seen not a princess or a child, but a strong woman who knew her own mind. The telepathic scan lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it was over, the ancient Velkari opened his eyes and looked at Jake with surprise. "This human's feelings are genuine," he announced to the court. "He loves the princess not for her beauty or her status, but for her intelligence, her courage, and her spirit. More importantly, his memories show that he has always treated her as an equal, never as a child or as someone beneath him." The matriarch was quiet for a long time after all 3 tests were complete. Finally, she stood and looked down at Jake from her throne. "You have passed the trials, human, but that does not mean I approve of this relationship. It means I will consider allowing it to continue." The matriarch stood from her throne and walked down to where Jake was still catching his breath from the trials. Up close, she was even more intimidating than before. Her 4 golden eyes studied Jake like he was some kind of strange insect she had never seen before. "You have surprised me, human," she said. "I expected you to fail within minutes. Instead, you have shown courage in combat, wisdom in strategy, and sincerity in your feelings for my daughter. But there is a larger problem. We must discuss." Jake wiped blood from his mouth and tried to stand straighter. "What problem?" "Your species," the matriarch said. "Humans are expanding into space without understanding the dangers that await them. There are powers in this galaxy that would destroy Earth simply because they view humans as a potential threat. Others would enslave your people or use them as soldiers in wars you cannot imagine. The Velkari Empire has been watching humanity's progress with great interest." This was not what Jake had expected to hear. "Are you saying you are going to attack Earth?" "I am saying I must decide whether to protect your species or eliminate the problem before it grows larger." The matriarch began walking around Jake like a predator circling prey. "Your relationship with my daughter has forced me to make this decision sooner than I planned." Zira stepped forward from where she had been standing beside the throne. "Mother, you cannot judge all humans based on one person. That is not fair." "Life is not fair, child," the matriarch replied. "It is about survival. The question is whether humans can be useful allies or if they will become dangerous enemies." Jake felt the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. Everything he said in the next few minutes could determine whether humanity lived or died. "What would we have to do to prove we could be good allies?" The matriarch smiled, but it was not a nice smile. "You could serve as mediators in galactic conflicts. Your species seems to have a talent for finding creative solutions to old problems. Your approach to the strategic test was unlike anything we have ever seen." "You want us to be diplomats," Jake said. "I want you to prove that human diplomacy is more valuable than human elimination," the matriarch corrected. "There is a trade dispute between the Velkari Empire and the Shard Collective that has been going on for 200 years. Previous negotiations have failed because both sides refuse to compromise. If you can resolve this conflict using your human methods, I will consider your species worthy of protection." Jake swallowed hard. "What happens if I fail?" "Then I will assume that you succeeded in the trials through luck rather than skill. The Velkari fleet will destroy every human colony and orbital station, then reduce Earth to ash. Your species will become a cautionary tale told to other young civilizations." The weight of this responsibility was crushing. Jake was a cargo pilot who barely finished high school. Now he was being asked to save his entire species through diplomatic negotiation with aliens he had never met. "I will need help," Jake said. "I do not know enough about galactic politics to do this alone." "You will have help," Zira said, stepping up beside Jake. "I will work with you. I know both cultures and I speak their languages." The matriarch's eyes narrowed as she looked at her daughter. "You would disobey direct orders to help this human." I would help prevent a war that could kill billions of innocent people, Zira replied. Is that not what you taught me a leader should do? For the first time since Jake had met her, the matriarch looked uncertain. She stared at her daughter for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. You may assist him, but if you fail, you will share his fate. The next 3 days were the most intense of Jake's life. Zira taught him everything she knew about the Shard Collective, a species of crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies and valued precision above all else. The trade dispute was over mining rights in a system called Kepler 442, which contained rare elements that both species needed. The Velkari claimed the system by right of first discovery. The Shard Collective claimed it by right of prior habitation, saying their ancestors had once lived on the planets before they became spacefaring. Both sides had valid legal arguments under different galactic law codes. Previous negotiations had failed because neither side would accept the other's claim as legitimate. Jake spent hours studying star charts, trade agreements, and legal documents that made his head hurt. But the more he learned, the more he started to see a solution that neither side had considered. The negotiations took place on a neutral station in unclaimed space. The Velkari delegation was led by Commander Thekvar, the same warrior Jake had fought in the trials. The Shard Collective sent 3 representatives who looked like walking statues made of living crystal. We have been through this many times, before, the lead Shard Collective representative said in a voice like ringing bells. The Kepler 442 system belongs to us by ancestral right. Your ancestors abandoned those worlds 3,000 years ago, Thekvar replied. We discovered them and have been mining them for 2 centuries. They are ours by right of occupation. Jake listened to them argue for an hour, saying the same things that had been said in dozens of previous negotiations. Finally, he cleared his throat and both sides looked at him. What if you are both right? Jake said. The room went silent. Explain. The Shard Collective representative demanded. You both have legitimate claims to the system, Jake continued. The Shard Collective has ancestral ties to the worlds. The Velkari have been actively using them for 2 centuries. Instead of fighting over who owns what, why not work together? We do not understand, Thekvar said. Jake activated the holographic display and showed them a new star chart he had been working on. The Shard Collective are the best miners in the galaxy. You can extract resources from places other species cannot reach. The Velkari have the best logistics and transport network in this sector. You can move goods faster and safer than anyone else. He pointed to different parts of the display as he talked. What if the Shard Collective took over mining operations in the system, using their superior techniques to extract more resources than the Velkari ever could alone? The Velkari would handle transport and distribution, using their networks to get those resources to markets across the galaxy. You propose joint ownership, the Shard Collective representative said. I propose joint profit, Jake corrected. Both species contribute what they do best. Both species benefit from the results. Instead of fighting over a limited resource extraction, you work together to extract more resources than either could manage alone. The negotiations continued for 2 more days, as both sides worked out the details. Jake found himself serving as translator, not just for languages, but for different ways of thinking about problems. The Velkari thought in terms of military strategy and territorial control. The Shard Collective thought in terms of mathematical precision and logical efficiency, but humans thought in terms of mutual benefit and creative problem-solving. Jake helped both sides see that cooperation could be more profitable than competition. He suggested ways to structure the joint venture that would protect both species' interests while maximizing their combined advantages. When the agreement was finally signed, both sides seemed surprised that they were satisfied with the outcome. The Shard Collective would get access to their ancestral worlds and the most advanced mining operation in the galaxy. The Velkari would maintain their strategic position in the sector and gain access to mining techniques that would benefit their operations on hundreds of other worlds. This is unprecedented, the Shard Collective representative said. In 200 years of negotiations, no one ever suggested that we could both benefit more by working together than by working separately. Commander Tekvar nodded in agreement. Human thinking is strange but effective. You have given us something more valuable than victory in our dispute. You have given us a more profitable peace. When they returned to the Velkari homeworld, the matriarch was waiting for them in the throne room. She listened carefully as Zira and Jake reported on the successful negotiations. "You have impressed me again, human," she said finally. "But you have also created a new problem. Word of your success is already spreading through the galaxy. Other species are asking if humans might help them resolve their own disputes. Your species has accidentally become galactic diplomats." Jake felt his heart sink. "Is that bad?" "It is dangerous," the matriarch replied. "There are powers in this galaxy who profit from conflict and chaos. They will not appreciate humans bringing peace and cooperation to worlds that have been fighting for centuries. You have made enemies you do not even know about yet." Jake was eating breakfast in his quarters when the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the palace, and he could hear Velkari voices shouting in their own language. He had been on the Velkari homeworld for 2 weeks now, long, enough to know that alarms usually meant something very bad was happening. Zira burst through his door without knocking, her golden eyes wide with fear. "Jake, we have to go right now. General Kexathera has taken control of the military. He says my mother has been compromised by alien influence and that you are a threat to our entire civilization." Jake grabbed his jacket and followed Zira into the hallway. Palace guards were running in both directions, some loyal to the matriarch and others following the general's orders. Jake could hear weapon fire echoing through the stone corridors. "Where is your mother?" Jake asked as they ran toward the palace garage. "She escaped through the emergency tunnels," Zira said, breathing hard. "But Kexathera has control of the capital city and most of the fleet. He is going to execute you publicly and then send the entire armada to destroy Earth." They reached the A garage where Commander Tekvar was waiting beside a fast-looking aircraft. The big warrior looked worried, which Jake found terrifying since Tekvar never seemed to worry about anything. "The general has declared martial law," Tekvar reported. "He claims that human influence is making us weak and that your diplomatic solutions will destroy our warrior culture. Half the military supports him." Jake climbed into the aircraft feeling sick. "How long before his ships reach Earth?" 6 days, Zira said. "Maybe less if he pushes the engines hard." They flew low and fast over the Velkari landscape, staying below radar as much as possible. Their destination was a communication array on the far side of the planet, one of the few that General Kexathera did not yet control. If they could reach it, they could warn Earth about the coming attack. But warning Earth might not be enough. Jake had seen the Velkari fleet. They had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop anything humans could throw at them. Even if Earth prepared for war, it would be like ants trying to fight eagles. "There has to be another way," Jake said as they flew through a canyon to avoid patrol ships. "We cannot win a war against your people." "Then we have to make sure there is no war," Zira replied. "My mother is gathering supporters who believe in the new diplomatic approach. If we can reach the communication array, we can coordinate with her forces." The flight took 3 hours, dodging military patrols and staying hidden in mountain valleys. When they finally reached the communication station, it was already under attack. General Kexathera's soldiers were trying to break through the defenses, while the station's guards fought back with everything they had. Tekvar piloted their aircraft in a screaming dive toward the battle. "Hold on, this is going to be rough." They landed hard in the middle of the firefight. Jake had never been in a real battle before, and the noise was overwhelming. Energy weapons buzzed and crackled while explosions shook the ground. "Velkari soldiers, On both sides moved with deadly precision, their natural armor protecting them from hits that would have killed a human instantly. Jake and Zira made it to the communication center, while Thekvar fought off soldiers trying to follow them. The equipment was more advanced than anything on Earth, but Zira quickly programmed in the coordinates for human space. "Jake, you have to warn your people," she said, activating the transmitter. "Tell them what is coming." Jake grabbed the communication device, hoping it would reach Earth in time. "This is Jake Morrison calling Earth Command. We have a code-red emergency. A Velkari battle fleet is heading toward Earth with orders to destroy all human colonies. You have maybe 6 days to prepare." The response came back filled with static, but readable. "Jake Morrison, this is Admiral Carter at Earth Defense Command. We received your message. What are your recommendations?" Jake thought fast. Earth's military could not win a straight fight against the Velkari, but maybe they did not have to fight at all. "Do not prepare for war," Jake said into the transmitter. "Prepare for a cultural exchange. When the Velkari fleet arrives, offer them music, art, food, and entertainment. Show them what makes humanity special. Let them see what they would be destroying." "Jake, that is insane," came the reply. "You want us to throw a party for an invasion fleet." "Trust me on this," Jake said. "The Velkari are not evil. They are just scared of change. Show them that humans can be friends instead of enemies." The communication was cut off when an explosion destroyed part of the station. General Kexathara's forces were breaking through the defenses. Jake, Zira, and Thekvar had to retreat deeper into the mountains, staying one step ahead of pursuit. For the next 4 days, they lived like refugees, moving from cave to cave while the civil war raged across the planet. Matriarch Seva had rallied the progressive faction of Velkari society, younger members who believed in Zira's vision of cooperation instead of conquest. But General Kexathara controlled most of the military and was winning the war. On the 5th day, they received a message from Earth. Admiral Carter's voice came through a portable communicator that Zira had salvaged from their crashed aircraft. "Jake, I hope you can hear this. The Velkari fleet arrived this morning. We did what you suggested. Instead of meeting them with weapons, we met them with jazz music and pizza. Half their ships are now in orbit around Earth listening to human concerts and trying our food. The other half seem very confused about what they are supposed to be attacking." Jake felt hope for the first time in days. "Did it work?" "Better than we expected," Admiral Carter continued. "Some of their ship captains are asking for cultural exchange programs. Others want to know if we can help them solve problems with other alien species. I think your crazy plan might actually be working." But their celebration was short-lived. General Kexathara's forces found their hiding spot and surrounded the cave where they had been sheltering. The general himself came to arrest them, flanked by a dozen heavily armed soldiers. "Princess, you have betrayed your own species for this. Human," the general said, his voice filled with disgust. "And you, human, have corrupted our culture with your weak philosophy of cooperation." Jake stepped forward, putting himself between the general and Zira. "Your own soldiers are at Earth, right now, learning that humans are not a threat. They are discovering that cooperation can be more profitable than conquest. How is that corruption?" "Because it makes us weak," the general snarled. "The Velkari Empire was built on strength and military might. Your diplomatic nonsense will make us soft and vulnerable to our enemies. Or it will give you allies instead of enemies," Jake replied. "How many species would help defend the Velkari Empire if you were known for bringing peace instead of war?" Before the general could respond, the sound of aircraft engines filled the air outside the cave. Matriarch Seva's voice echoed from speakers on the ships hovering overhead. "General Kexathara, you are ordered to stand down immediately. Half of your fleet has defected after experiencing human culture firsthand. Your remaining forces are outnumbered 3-1. This coup is over." The general's soldiers looked uncertain, their weapons lowering slightly. Through their communicators, They could hear reports from their comrades at Earth describing the wonders they had discovered there. "The humans offered us food and music," one ship captain reported. "They showed us their art and their history. These are not monsters to be destroyed. These are people who could be valuable friends." General Kexathera realized that his support was crumbling. His soldiers were laying down their weapons one by one as they heard the reports from Earth, the war he had started to preserve. Velkari culture was being ended by that very culture's exposure to human ideas. 6 months later, Jake and Zira were married in a ceremony that combined human and Velkari traditions. The wedding was held on Earth, with representatives from dozens of alien species attending. Matriarch Seva, now convinced of both Jake's worth and her daughter's maturity, performed the ceremony herself. The Velkari Empire had become the first major galactic power to embrace human-style diplomacy. Trade agreements replaced territorial disputes. Cultural exchanges replaced military conquests. Other alien species began asking for human mediators to help resolve their own conflicts. Jake still flew cargo ships, but now his routes included diplomatic missions to distant worlds. Earth had become known throughout the galaxy as a neutral meeting ground where enemies could become friends over coffee and conversation. During their wedding reception, Matriarch Seva approached Jake with something that might have been a smile. "I owe you an apology, human," she said. "When you first came to our world, I saw you as a threat to my daughter and my people. I was wrong. You have given us something more valuable than military victory. You have given us hope for a better future." Jake raised his glass in a toast. "To the future," he said. "May it be boring and peaceful and full of good food and bad jokes." Zira laughed and kissed her new husband. "Only a human would hope for a boring future after saving 2 civilizations." "Hey," Jake replied, "boring is underrated. I have had enough excitement to last several lifetimes." But even as he said it, Jake knew that his life would never be boring again. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were species at war who needed mediators. There were conflicts that could be solved with creativity instead of violence. There were aliens who had never tasted pizza or heard jazz music. Jake Morrison, Cargo, pilot-turned-galactic diplomat, had found his true calling, and it all started because he fell in love with a girl who said she was an adult.